Hello! Welcome to Stories for Wonderful Children. I'm Dan Wendelin, your host and storyteller. For many years, I made up a new bedtime story for my children every night, and when they had to go to school online in 2020, I made up a long story for them called Myra and the Online School. This next part of the story was another lost episode, but this one I just can't summarize for you. This one you have to hear. So here's my retelling of the episode of Myra and the Online School I'm calling Something Ancient. I hope you enjoy it. Once Tweety had agreed to accompany Myra into the woods to look for Deer Church, she felt like there was no time to waste. They grabbed their practice weapons, and Myra grabbed her map of the woods from mapping class, remembering getting so thoroughly lost the last couple times she'd been in. Together they left their room and headed for the stairwell. As they reached the stairwell, they heard the sound of other people coming up, and when they reached the first landing, Myra was delighted to see that it was Antoine and Corin and Chelsea. "Hey, Myra. Hey, Tweety," said Antoine. "We were just getting ready to head over to the cafeteria to see if there was any ice cream. You want to come?" "Well," said Myra, looking over at Tweety. "Actually, Tweety and I were just getting ready to head to the forest. We're going to go find Deer Church." Antoine looked a little skeptical for a second. "Deer Church," he said. "Again? Really?" Tweety shrugged. "It really did happen," Tweety said. "And I think they might be there again tonight." "We're going," said Myra. "You want to come?" "I'm in," said Corin. Chelsea and Antoine exchanged looks. Chelsea sighed. "Okay," she said. "But if we don't find Deer Church, we're coming back and going for ice cream. Fair enough?" "You got it," said Myra. And so they turned and accompanied them down the stairs and out into the deepening twilight of the campus of the online school. They headed straight for the tree line, and before long, they were stepping onto the path that led them into the woods. They were only a few steps in before Corin said, "It is very dark in here. Do we actually know where we're going?" "I brought my map," said Myra. "And," said Tweety, "I can see perfectly in the dark, so just follow me." So they let Tweety lead the way along the path as it wound through the trees. Myra kept track on her homemade map, and when they reached the bend in the path, she said, "This is it." Tweety turned off, and they followed. The forest seemed very different at night. There were no birds calling, but there were many other animal noises. And off in the distance Myra could hear crashing in the trees that she was sure must be one of the giant spiders that inhabited the forest. "How much farther?" said Chelsea. "It seems like we ought to be there by now." Myra said, "It always seems farther in the dark." "Shh," said Tweety. "If Deer Church is going on, we don't want them to know that we're here watching." "Why?" said Antoine. "I don't know if we're welcome," said Tweety. So after that, they did their very best to practice their sneaker silence, and they were a good deal quieter. Before long, Tweety stopped, and they stopped beside Tweety. Tweety leaned forward, pointing. "That's the clearing," Tweety said. Myra peered through the last set of trees. The clearing was empty. "Oh," she said. "It's just a clearing," she said. "There's nothing." "Shh," said Antoine. "Do you hear that?" "What?" said Myra. The crashing in the trees that they had heard earlier was getting louder, was getting closer. "Everybody stay still," said Tweety. Myra held her breath as the crashing seemed to grow so very loud, and then through the other side of the clearing she saw a spider the size of a house burst out of the trees, running straight towards them. "It's attacking us," said Chelsea. "It's not," said Antoine. "It's running from something." "Look," whispered Tweety. Behind the spider trailed something that looked like a web, but a web gone crazy, spinning on itself, and strands shooting in all directions, but mostly strands shooting towards the giant spider. As they watched, the spider made it only about halfway across the clearing before the strands began to wrap around its legs and pull it to the ground. "What is that?" said Myra. "Is it getting stuck in its own webbing?" "No," said Antoine. "Look." Myra looked again. She could see in the middle of all those spinning strings of web a set of glowing eyes. "I don't like this," said Tweety. "I don't know what that is." "We should go. We shouldn't move," said Myra. "Be quiet. Maybe it won't." And then the webbed spinning thing seemed to turn towards them. They all froze. Utterly silent, Myra felt a ball of pure fear in her stomach. Whatever this was, it was something very dangerous and very old, and it was coming towards them. "If it doesn't turn in a second, we run. Run for the school and don't stop," she said. But just as the spinning thing seemed to approach them, from the side of the clearing burst one of the biggest deer Winella had ever seen. Its antlers glowed a strange blue, and it accelerated across the clearing, slamming into the webbed spinning thing. Another deer followed it from the other side of the clearing, and then a third, bursting past them through the trees, slamming into the webbed thing. Each time the spinning thing was thrown back a bit, but it began to throw webs at the deer, who were dodging left, right. Behind them, they heard rustling movement. There was another deer standing behind them. It looked at them for a moment as its antlers began to glow blue. It whispered, "You should not be here. You are no match for the string demon. Return to the school where you belong." And with that, it leapt past them into the clearing and charged toward the demon. "I don't need to hear that twice," said Antoine, and he led them back through the forest, helter-skelter, tripping over branches, dodging around trees. Myra wasn't sure whether the crashing in the woods around them was the thing that the deer had called a string demon, or the giant spider, or the deer, or her friends, and she didn't care. She just wanted to get back to the school and the safety of her warm bed. "I will never go into the forest again. I will never go into the forest again. I don't care about Deer Church," she said, as then the trees ahead of them thinned, and they burst onto the path. They looked at each other, and then turned and began to walk back toward the school. No one said a word until they had stepped back onto the wide, grassy lawn of campus. As Myra counted to make sure that her friends were all around her, they heard a crashing noise, and they stepped back, and there, coming to the edge of the trees, was the spinning thing of webs, the thing the deer had called a string demon. But it stopped right at the edge of the trees, its glowing eyes staring at them as they backed away and backed away. "I don't think it's going to follow us," said Tweety. "Yeah," said Myra. "Something keeps it off of campus." "Well," said Chelsea, "I think we were going to talk about ice cream." Myra looked at her. "Seriously?" she said. Chelsea shrugged. "I'm hungry," she said. "And it's got to be better than what we've been doing." Myra looked at the rest of them. "Okay," she said. "Ice cream sounds good." And they turned and headed toward the cafeteria. Thanks for listening to Stories for Wonderful Children. I created today's show, but questions and running commentary were supplied by my children. The theme music was created by Brandon Thompson, and our wonderful logo was designed by Silas Swindelin. If you know someone who might enjoy the show, please tell them about it. Do you want more stories? You can now subscribe to the show and help pick a new story for me to tell every month. The show's website is storiesforwonderfulchildren.com. Until next time, I'm Dan Wendelin, reminding you to tell someone you love a story.